Now that's significant. The Market Research Podcast.
Kia ora koutou, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome. You can't see me, which is good. Ian Mills from the Research Association here. Thank you for joining us for this session. Today with me we have John O'Toole on my left-hand side, Glen Wright, Maria Tyrrell and Horst Feldhaeuser, all of whom have been involved in the Research Awards in some way, shape or form over some previous years. So Horst is a previous entrant. Have you won anything?
Just
one. Yes,
just a few Supremes.
Just a few Supremes. And Horst is also one of our judges as well. Has been involved in the judging process. Yeah. Maria is a previous winner as well. Glen has also been a previous winner and is also sitting on the RANDS board with me as well. And John is our head judge, or our head of judging, and has also been involved with a number of amazingly successful marketing campaigns in various roles over the time as well. So thank you everybody for joining us. We're going to treat this today as a bit of a roundtable discussion. So hopefully you won't hear too much more from me. I'll be pushing questions out to the panel. We've got the chat open if you would like to drop questions into the chat, and I will flick through those as we go. But I suppose first, just to kick off, just to give a bit of background to everybody about the awards. They're not far away. I know there are a lot of people out there starting to think about the process, but John, can you just talk us through a little bit of how that judging process works and what's going to happen once entries finally hit Claire's email box?
Yeah, so the judging process actually starts with selecting the judges, which is making sure we've got a really balanced team of experienced people, like you can see around the table here, who have been involved and been seen to be using research effectively in the past. And those judges are split into category teams mostly. So that's the first part of it, just making sure we've got that balance right and we avoid any conflicts. And then the entries are shared via teams, so they're kept very confidential. And the judges initially only see the entries that are in their category. So that's all taken very, very seriously. The last few years or the last few times, I should say, we've been, because of COVID and various things, trying to do everything remotely. So this year we're going back to face-to-face meetings, a couple of them. The first meeting is really about briefing the judges, making sure the new judges are clear about the criteria and how we go about things and the process. And they break into groups in that first meeting and they actually start the judging against the criteria, which is the same criteria you can see in your entry form.
Right.
So the criteria is very clear. It's all laid out very clearly and specifically. And then those teams will go away after that first meeting and meet once or if necessary twice until they get their category winners, their golds and their silvers winners against the criteria. And they'll also highlight to us any potential Supreme winners, any special award winners. And in the meantime, I'm trying to loop around as head judge. Hopefully we can do that more face-to-face in the first meeting now, but loop around and make sure if there's any questions, they get answered quickly. If there's any things that aren't clear or not sure about, we get those sorted out for them very quickly and get back to just a clean judging against the criteria.
And in terms of the background, Horst, what sort of people have you run across in the judging process?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think as John mentioned, it's a really widespread of industry professionals, really. So anything from client-side researchers to advertising, comms people, some market research people that are adjacent or in the industry. Of course, we are working on the confidentiality, so you can't work in a category where you might have a conflict of interest or sorts. But everyone who's part of that is really experienced and has, as John said, experienced effective market research where the research had actually an impact into the business. So everyone has slightly different viewpoints, which is quite interesting, certainly when it comes to the judging. As John said, within our groups, we come together and we discuss our ratings, and usually everyone has, top one or two or three. And sometimes that matches perfectly with the other judges, and sometimes it doesn't because they have a different view. Say if someone comes from more of a market research background, to someone who comes more from a comms background, and
Right.
then you discuss that, and you agree, and you take on board their views. So it's a really good and robust discussion, and I think it's such a breadth. But everyone, as John said as well, has been involved in market research in one way or another and understands what a business impact is. So it's not like we're like, oh, we don't know.
So either client or a government agency or not for
Or
profit.
or not for profit, or it could be a comms agency or
Yeah.
advertising agency. I mean, we've got a couple of people like Anne Ranger or Simon from Counts, so different people from different backgrounds.
Yeah, of course. In terms of that judging process, you talked about kind of disagreements and when there are disagreements. Talk us through how you kind of manage that, but also a little bit around the, I suppose the judging experience that some of these judges have had as well, because they all look reasonably senior.
Yeah, they're very senior, and most of them have been involved in other awards, whether it's FE awards or marketing awards, or so there's quite a lot of experience. In fact, we purposely make sure we've got that. The final meeting is actually about when we come together. This time will be face to face, because I think we're kind of missing that face to face debate, and it's very hard to debate in a video setting. We've discovered can go off the wires very quickly, but the face to face meeting is where we really open it up for the full discussion. And it's also the meeting where we can make sure that we're consistent across the categories, which again has been a bit hard to do in video. But now we can have those big discussions. And some years we have massive discussions, and some years everyone just agrees. Like Horst said, we just, everybody, oh, that one just floats out neatly. But yeah, sometimes we've had some really big debates and discussions, and it's been very valuable, I think, everyone talking that through and thrashing it out till they're clear.
Cool. We've got our first question coming through. Thanks from Liz down at Research First. Can you define what you mean by impact in this setting? And I think it comes back to the question around, you talked about the impact that a piece of work can have and its effectiveness, and they're kind of, whether they're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, I can start with that, and maybe you guys can jump in from your experience as well. So I think there's a number of different ways a piece of research can have an impact, and I had a list. So it could be a financial impact, right? So you sell more things, or you all of a sudden, you improve what you position it. But it could also have a social or community impact. So you're changing something in the market, in the population. It could be changes within the organization. All of a sudden, market research becomes not an add-on, but it becomes something that is part of the business. So I think about it. It needs to be more than just a change in a number in a research project, right? So, say for example, customer satisfaction. Yes, you might change your net promoter score and you improve that, and you can obviously measure that. But that's not enough to have an actual impact on the business.
That's just changing the bar.
That's just changing the bar. But what does that do to your business, right? Does it mean that all of a sudden you're number one in insurances, and that means that you get more business, and all of a sudden? So the only way to get that is you have to talk to your clients, to your end clients. You need to understand, and they need to be open to talk to you about what has actually changed through that piece of research. And sometimes that's not possible in all the detail because there's some confidentiality, but you usually can make a good story about that.
Yeah.
John,
I think the main thing is and it's all laid out in your entry form, but we need to understand the context and opportunity problem trying to be solved, and then the results against that. But I think I'd encourage everyone to think of impact not just in that, because there's other impacts like, and it's again in the entry form, impact on the relationship with the researcher and the clients, impact on how the company operates going forward, some societal impacts. So some are just about societal impacts and what we change actually out in society in terms of actual changes in behaviour and attitudes and perceptions. So,
Maria, your entry that one of your ones that you won with years ago, it still sticks in my mind because of an impact.
Yeah, an unusual, yes.
An unusual impact. Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that was one where the client the competitor had launched a product, and it took 6% market share in 2 months. So the client was in full panic mode. But we did some, great research to show that the product had an issue, but also the brand itself was not gelling or really didn't have great equity with consumers. And that really the answer was to use some of their other brands to kind of solve the issue rather than what they were going to do, which was spend a lot of money on new machinery to match this product. So the research gave them confidence to do that. So they did nothing. They used their other brands to kind of pincer move this product, and within a year it was gone. So it was a great example of doing nothing. We didn't see wiggly lines on a graph, which is really, really challenging, but the research gave them that confidence. So I think, and for me, you always start at the end. You start with the client. And if you have a great client relationship, along the way, you would know what the impact is. I mean, there's nothing worse than doing a piece of research and then 2 years later having to go back to the client and say, did it have an impact? Hopefully you've got a relationship where there's something going on, so you can keep up with it and say, okay, it did. I remember one entry we did where it was about organizational change. They hadn't even gone really out to market yet, but it was about what happened within the organization and how it turned it on its head. So don't always think about it having to be a wiggly line on a sales chart.
Yeah, that's right.
That's great. But not always.
Yeah, and there is in the entry pack as well, there is one of the last, and try not to think of these as first as last, but one of the criteria is unintended consequences or other consequences that this research has had. So I think digging deep into client organisations, into your own organisations and finding out what that's done is really useful. Glenn, you've been on both sides. Tell us a little bit about what that task is like internally in managing stakeholders to get a piece of work entered into the awards.
It starts out a little bit kind of complicated there, and it's interesting too because is it a piece that we've started writing, as an in-house team? Because sometimes we've put our own entry in something we've developed ourselves, or something we really like as well is when our agencies say, hey, this piece of work is really great. Put an entry in, and the best ones really are where there's a partnership kind of between that, because in a big organization particularly, the agency will know what the big kind of headlines are, but of course there is work to do around going and talking to some of the different stakeholders, or what is that kind of broader impact and what is the story coming out, because really what you're doing is you're still telling a story about what the impact is.
Do you have you found you've had challenges getting stakeholders to buy into the entry process and to release work, because they have to sign a release for the work to go into the awards?
It can be a bit of a challenge to get a lot of buy-in. I suppose I've had the luxury of having quite large programs, so we've usually got some that are, we'll have a buy-in and it is a bit easier, and we can do that kind of comfort, because at this point, and I think this is the hardest point in the awards kind of process, is what have we actually done, and what actually tells a good story, and what can we get, what are we going to get buy-in from, and what can we get a good story, what stakeholders do we have to kind of talk to, and also are there any barriers to getting those things?
Oh, nice. Question from Amanda in Ipsos down in Wellington. What tips do you have for demonstrating impact or effectiveness in research methodology, particularly if the judges are not researchers?
Oh, okay. So I think the research methodology, that's obviously a question that comes up every single time. If the methodology has ultimately an impact on the outcomes of the business, so the way you structured your research, you got to answers that otherwise you wouldn't have gotten to, I think that is that's where it has an impact. If it's just a really cool piece of methodology or how to get sample, and doesn't have really an impact on the business, probably not effective, not a good idea. So the question is,
an innovation entry.
Yes, it could be. Yes, so it really depends. So it's we are not charging methodology, right? So in the first place, we're charging the impact of the research piece on the business. So if there is a super innovative way of getting to a sample, or say, for example, you manage to get hold of a group that otherwise you wouldn't have, and that has then a massive impact on your client or the organization, then yes, that'll be part of it. That'll be, but I don't think it matters so much if and then I would talk that up, right? So you have to then talk that up rather than yeah, assuming that we understand what you mean. But if you say, well, we did 300 interviews and we did a conjoint study and such, yeah,
I mean,
it's okay.
It's kind of got to pass the sniff test in the first place, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In terms of method, because there are researchers that will be on the different
Yeah,
teams.
and in
But
most teams, you have researchers that
Yeah.
who understand that. Yeah.
Although, just to slightly challenge that, it might be that you did 2 focus groups,
Yeah.
but it had this unbelievable impact in the organisation. It's,
Yeah, yeah,
so
it's
so
100%.
so that's why methodology is well, actually I'm supporting you. Methodology is the basis of it, but this is not the research methodology awards, it's the research effectiveness awards. So it could be as small as that or as big as a longitudinal, but it's the impact.
And we've had a winner like that in the past. I remember a piece of qual.
Yeah.
If you look back in the archives, there's the Maritime New Zealand.
Yes.
work.
Thinking about
Yes.
this.
And I think it was 4 to 6 focus groups, but it just got so
Completely.
much traction internally and almost took on a life of its own.
Yeah.
So much buy-in in that one.
Yeah.
But maybe it's an entry for the innovation. Can we talk a little?
Sure.
Talk a little bit about the innovation award.
Yeah, and so remembering this time around, as last time, the Innovation Award is a separate entry. So it's a separate submission that people will be putting together. The judges, while they'll be looking at innovation as one of the criteria as we go through thinking about innovation as they go through the category awards, in the industry awards, innovation is a separate one. So if you've got something that really sticks out there, again, it's got to show effectiveness, but that's another area to be looking to enter as well. Thanks for that, Amanda. Hopefully we've covered your question. If there are others online who want to drop a question into the chat, please do so and we can make sure we cover those off. What about tips and tricks? So what about sort of general things that people have learned over the years, either from entering or being a judge or being a client? What sort of things have worked for you when putting an entry together in the past?
I haven't been a judge on the effectiveness awards, but I have been a judge on other awards. And I think you have to make it easy for the judges. The judges are giving a lot of their time and they might have to read 20 entries. And the more it's like a story, the better. So we would always start at the end. What is the impact? And then build it backwards. So again, the methodology being not really that important. And then things like some people are really great at writing and some people aren't. I'm not particularly, but I had people in the organisation who were great. So they would tell the story. We would storyboard it. What is our story? This is the impact, work backwards. And then we would have someone who was a really great writer write them, make it easy on the judges to see the story and see the impact. So,
do you do any sort of vetting processes, or do you get other parties to review it?
Yes, I mean, obviously the client is, and as I said before, we start with the client. So the client is the most important person to sign it off and, put quotes in or whatever. But yes, you always, it's like anything, you multiple levels of reviewing, but that would be my biggest thing, is make it easy for the judges to see the story and keep it short, tight, all of that.
Glen, your entries have been in sort of government sector work. Not sometimes particularly exciting.
Speak for yourself. You may very well think so.
A number of there are a lot of social pieces of
Yes.
work that come through very clearly in the awards.
I think a lot of the most interesting ones have come recently have come from that sector. Really.
Yeah.
So is there something about that sector that helps in that process, or what sort of process do you use?
Look, it helps, but it can be pretty challenging there as well, because what's the story? Is it something that is kind of fairly compelling? And we've had a variety of kind of styles of entries as well. Some that are really quite long with loads of kind of technical things and are impressive in that kind of complexity, but the ones I kind of do have a soft spot for and probably have a better hit rate for are the ones that are built around that story, because and that story is good for not only your client, as in someone like me, but my client is in the internal stakeholder, and then that getting sign-off question that we kind of had before. Because if you go into a GGM, you go, well, not only is this the bit, but also this is the only information that's going out kind of public. We're not releasing the the whole thing. We're telling this fairly simple story, and then we've got the rest there. And then sometimes the best ones have come, backwards from, that was a really great social marketing, campaign, that we've had, or actually we've reached a load of different, places and organizations of work that has been to conferences and had a lot of buy-in and come backwards from there.
And I think Glenn made a really good point there as well. It is the story, and it is what is the business impacts, right? But if we write that submission in a way that we could say, well, we could actually then give that to the client, and they have it as an internal case study, right?
Yeah.
So I can go to Glenn and say, hey, here's our submission, right? And then he can distribute it amongst his stakeholders, right? It's fantastic, right? Because then everyone in the organizations, sees the value of market research, and that's what we want to do ultimately, right? It's our job as market researchers, or as agencies, is making our clients famous within their organization, right? So, and if that's part of your submission, then you're already halfway there. So it comes down to the storytelling. And then also, and sometimes, John, you will remember that we sometimes look at it like, this is a great story, but we wish they would just tell us, the 2 or 3 things that really have changed and impacted.
the results.
So make sure that you, again, do that sniff test or whatever you want to call it. Great story, yes, but you still need to have a great ending, a climax where you say, and this is what has happened with this market, with this work. And then again, depends on what the impact is.
John, question for you from Nikki at Perceptive. For the entry itself, I see there's a note in the entry pack about being able to append up to 3 pages of supporting documentation. Does this mean all our graphs, tables, testimonials, and quotes need to be in this section so that they can be spread out, across the story of the entry? I think we're saying no, they can be spread out, can't we? But the extras at the back.
Yeah, you've got to tell your story in the entry itself. The appendices are there really to help accentuate particular things. So that's the way I think about it. Like if you particularly charts, diagrams that really help explain what you can't put into words in the entry, then I'd put that in the appendix, those 3 pages. And we have limited because we've got too many sometimes, too much. But that's the way I think about that.
So and that's part of kind of trying to keep the entry tight.
Yeah.
And go, does this picture, does this image, does this appendix actually help with the story? If not, you probably want to leave it out.
Yeah.
Or it's just going to confuse them.
I like that everyone's talking about story because that's what it is. You have a compelling story, and the entry is about crafting a story that is compelling. And the compelling part you're trying to get across, it's not the what, who, when, or where, because that's just necessary info. It's it's mostly about the why. It's about the how and what's innovative or different or compelling or made a difference in the how, which is what Horst was trying to explain before. And the bulk of it, the 65% of the grade, is actually how much did it move the dial for the client? How much is it? So the more you can ladder that story and kind of work back from that, the more compelling your story is going to be, the more compelling your entry is going to be. Another tip, though, is get all that key information in your summary, because the judges are going to skim that summary, and you really want to say what you're going to say and then say it and then summarize at the end what you said. But make sure that summary has got all those key points in it.
And that way you already have the summary for the, when the judges read out your winning entry at the end, they read out that part, so you've already got that as well. So
another question from Nicole at IAG. It sounded like the successful submissions tend to come from an agency client submissions, so joint submissions. If so, how can a client-only submission write an equally strong submission, or is that not recommended? My answer to that one straight up, Nicole, would be go for your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've done it.
Glenn's the man.
We've had some great ones from clients.
The first one that I won was a fairly modest qualitative piece for a social marketing campaign. I will say that I did thank a bunch of partners on the kind of the virtual team as we kind of came up, on there, which was really great fun, actually. And again, it was having the supporting evidence around it. So we did have an evaluation of the program that came out of the back end of that. So most of the story was around kind of how we got there, how hard it was, to put this thing up, that did this thing that changed the narrative. And then we had some evaluative research to have some kind of numbers around the kind of program support back as well.
So definitely internal only.
Internal and client only, and then of course there is the Insights Organization of the Year award category, which is an opportunity not only to review bits of work you've done, but yeah, the impact you're having as a team across the whole
that's the
place.
point. I mean, from a as a separate category, that Insights Organisation of the Year is a really interesting one to look at, and the stories in those submissions have been fantastic to read.
They have been great, yeah.
Flip side of that, and I've seen this in the past when I've judged Effies or Beacons or media awards. What are the red flags that come up from time to time when you read an entry and you go, oh, because we do get them from time to time, right? You'll see the odd entry that you look at and we talk about, you know.
The biggest sin is just light on actual results.
Yeah.
So we've had some entries just really struggling to say, what was the result here?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the biggest red flag. Well, great. Another one is kind of back to Horst's point is these great commercial results, but you can't tie it to what about the research or what particularly in the research impacted that right and drove that result. That's another kind of red flag. So that laddering of the story back to this is where we started, this is how we went about it, this is what we did, this is how we what came out of it and how we acted on it. That laddering gets really important. So
in some ways it's actually quite a basic storytelling process, isn't it?
It's just laddering that
Classic,
story.
yeah. And that's why the client involvement is so important, because they are the ones who can tell you what that impact was. So they are the ones who make those connections. And if they're not able to, then
that's when Nicole already has an advantage to everyone else. If she does the internal case study, man, you already know what's going on. You know, for us or for agencies, we need to go back and hopefully, as you said before, we have that relationship, right? And
that we can.
And thinking back when I was working in the research agency, you actually sometimes with projects you already think, ooh, this could have an impact. Right?
Yes,
so you want to keep to that close. So it actually goes back, 2 years almost when you have started working on it often. And depends on how close you are with your relationships with your clients. But that's where you often think, oh yes, and then you want to keep in touch with them and see what's going on.
I was always thinking.
Yeah, always on the lookout.
Always on the lookout. I was like, I think that this is going to have an impact on this.
Yeah.
So you just keep in contact. Yeah.
Another red flag though is while I think about it is not talking about the collaboration and how you've enabled it in the organisation.
Right.
So that's definitely a red flag, because we're definitely looking for how did he get from the problem definition to doing some work to actually making sure it got acted on.
Getting traction.
Getting traction. So, but if there's no talk about collaboration, that kind of doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Question from Michael at InfoTools. How do you navigate commercial sensitivity with the entries if the clients won't let you talk about effectiveness, or should that be something early on that you're looking at to go, might not be able to do this yet?
Yeah, and I think sometimes there are ways around it where you can say we doubled our revenue, right? But we're not going to tell you how much that is.
Yeah.
Or things like that. So and that might happen. That's probably the nature of the game, right? So and we had sometimes entries that we thought this could be a winner, and then we had the client say, can't talk about it.
Yeah.
And then you can't. And it's sad because this would have totally won. And the client knows as well. And Glen's probably had the same, where the internal stakeholders said, no, we don't think so.
My favourite one was in a marketing effectiveness award where a car company had put or the agency for a car company had put an entry in, and they were talking about how they had absolutely smashed their sales targets for this particular vehicle, this new model. They were 450% over their sales target for this car. And then you found out that, their actual target was only like 1 or 2 cars to start with.
Right. Still smashed it.
Yeah, it's still smashed it. But
well, if it's a $500,000 car, pretty good.
That context is important. That's the kind of thing that comes up in the discussion with the judges. Is is it really, or where it doesn't kind of feel right?
Benchmarks are important.
Well, the market context is important. So in prior year results, if you can't get actual against goals and objectives, there's prior year stuff. And there should always be something clients will talk about. I would have thought. There's some things they can't say, but there should be some things you can talk about, like.
So context is important.
Yeah, that context is important.
In terms of budget, this year we've dropped the small budget category for a number of reasons, but we do take budget into account. So can you talk us through a little bit about that process?
Yeah, that's always another good debate with the judges. But that's part of the context, right? The context is big company, big problem, little company, big problem, no money. Those ones sometimes even the real gems, right?
Mm.
And sometimes the research they're doing is really simple research, but they stretch to get there. Or really simple but effective research, which made the difference in getting the information they needed to get that right.
Right.
So that kind of thing is all taken into account. We do, if there is someone on a low budget, we'll try and pull that out and say, hey, this is potentially a small budget.
Because this year it will be a judge's prize, special judge's prize. Separate, so.
And I think it comes back to the idea of when we talk about methodology, because most of the cost is often the methodology, right? So if you do, 1,000 interviews versus 2 focus groups. So we're not judging the methodology unless it has had a massive impact on the effectiveness. So as you said before as well, right? There's some projects, or the maritime one that you mentioned, Ian, where it was based on 3 or 4 focus groups, right? Very low budget, but what came out and the impact it had on the organization was huge. And then you compared it to, say, a big budget one with hundreds of interviews and conjoin and stuff, blah, blah, blah. And again, well, if it had a little impact, well, yeah, but it could have had a massive impact, right? So I think from a judge's point of view, we are aware of that and we can make that call.
Yeah. Yes. And again, there's the sustained impact award as well, which the last winner,
which is ongoing,
was like 25 years work.
Yeah.
That was just building and building and building. And it was a fantastic case study in a long-term relationship and that iterative process of moving things forward.
Kind of what you hope you see, what you see more and more of. Long-term sustained impacts and partnerships.
For the people who've entered in the past, is there anything that you would have done differently? If you think back to some of your entries in the bad old days, anything you would have done, whether it's the timing of the entry or the way you put it together?
I think the only thing is sometimes if you don't have the actual results yet, and then that is sometimes a judgment call that you have to make, and we've seen that as well. I think in some of the awards or entries where we look at them as judges and say,
too early.
Too early.
Too early.
I should have waited another year or 2 or whatever. But because we only do them every 2 years, so it's a bit of it's a judgment call. But sometimes you don't see the results quite yet.
Don't be impatient. Just wait till it's absolutely.
Yeah, because there are some that stick in your mind and go, wow, just too early.
And it comes back to also, as we said before, to start thinking about an entry from the moment you work on
absolutely,
right? Earmark it, and then when it gets to it, make sure that you understand what's going on, and then start thinking about what could that story be.
I think that's one of the challenges, I suppose, when you're working agency side, but also internally as well, because we're quite project focused. You finish that one, done and dusted, don't think about it anymore. That whole process you talked about, Horst, of going back, finding out what went on, getting close to Maria, the same sort of thing with you. That sounds like it's really key. Good stuff. I'm just looking for more questions out of our people on board. We've got quite a few people online today, so please don't feel scared of chucking any questions up into the chat. This is a research group. There should be no dumb questions. We're all just here to ask and learn. So, and timelines are ticking down pretty quickly. Oh, here we go. Michael Howard again. How novel does an entry need to be? If you've submitted the entry in the past but done more work on it, what advice would you have for people in this position? It's a double header. That's 2 questions, Michael. Let's deal with the first one first. How novel does the entry need to be?
It's not so much about being novel, although what I would say as a tip is try and think about what's innovative and different, what you've had to tailor for this particular project, because you're always tailoring, from a problem that's how you do it. You're always tailoring, so there's always innovation. So the judges like to see innovation, just as a tip. Some of them keep asking, they're looking for it. But it's not about that. These awards are about effectiveness. and how little things and how you've gone about it made a difference in terms of results for the client. So that's what you want to focus on. There is the separate innovation award. So
Yeah. And Michael being greedy with 2 questions in there. In terms of if you've submitted an entry in the past but done more work on it, what advice would you give to people in this position?
It has to be about the extra work, I think, or how that builds on and makes a change. And interesting enough, I just remembered last year, we actually had an entry that looked very similar to the one I judged 2 years prior to that. And it was the same, I think it was the same client, same agency, and it was just a little bit different. And maybe one was consumer, the other was business, but it was almost the identical entry. And I was like, really? So it has to be different in a way. It could be, yes, it's, we've done this and maybe even say it in your submission. We've submitted 2 years ago, but we weren't quite there. And then we did this and this and this and added, and all of a sudden it took off. That's where you show the difference. That's where you show the impact rather than doing the same thing.
Right, because that leads into my next question from Liz. So thank you for reading my mind, Liz. How many years do you see as sufficient for the sustained impact category? We've had everything there, haven't we? We've had the 20-25 years last time around, and we've had 2, 3, 4 years. Probably, I would say probably no less than 3.
Yeah, I'd say you need at least 3, but we are seeing more and more over the years that is really cool to see insights capabilities being built in organisations, and particularly inside organisations with research companies. So they're working together over an extended period of time, and we're seeing entries often 10, 20, at least over 20 years.
And the ones I like are the ones that also bring in other disciplines. So where they might have brought in a data analytics team, or they might have brought in a design or UX team. And it's that real cross-pollination that really 1 + 1 equals 12 in some cases.
That's the wider team and context thing. We're looking for the collaboration, but also how you're engaging the widest team. Some of the government ones, they've got heaps of stakeholders. They're trying to
do.
Well, these days.
but generally they've got a lot of stakeholders they're trying to cover and make sure are on board and lined up and acting the same in the way they want them to.
And we've got programs that run for a long time. We could be working on stuff for quite a long time, which is the temptation and the decision making to be made at the moment, right? So we may be building a brand and a new product that was going to go launch, and we're super proud of this and it's innovative, etc. But is it kind of there yet? And then other things that we have been working on for a while ourselves, and the programs have been going sometimes for decades. And then that question is, hey, we just really does it feel different than it was a couple of last time we reviewed this and talked about it?
Other questions that we've got on here. We've talked a little bit about budget being taken into account. The other thing to remember for everyone on the call is that we have a new category this year, which is for the most effective agency awards. So in order to be included in that, you'll need to have at least 3 entries in, and your best 3 entries across all categories you put in will be taken as your kind of body of work, and then we'll be selecting from that who the winner on the night is. So something for the agencies to be thinking about, as well as for the clients to be thinking about, the client organisation of the year as well, so internal research teams. From the panel, any other questions or any other points that you guys want to make about the awards process itself? I mean, do you enjoy being involved in the awards?
Funny enough, I was just about to say that. I think you have to. I mean, it's going to be stressful because there's obviously a timeline, right? So the sooner you start thinking about it, the better. So as we said, you've worked on something and it's like, you already might have some ideas, but enjoy it, right? Because I mean, that's what we do. I mean, our job is to make, whether it's a client side, agency side, whatever, we want to make a difference to the world, the business, want to sell more stuff or whatever, but enjoy it, right? So kind of try to enjoy writing a story. And if you're not a good story writer, get someone to help you, right? And you can put those things together and find someone in your organization and say, hey, here's my bullet points for each of those things. Can you write it? Maybe chuck it into AI.
I was just going to say not
ChatGPT.
AI, but
Oh.
and I do judge the marketing awards, and this year there were some entries that had definitely been written by AI, and you could tell.
Really?
Not good. The other thing I just would say is please, for the judges' sake, spell check,
Yes.
all of that. Had an entry this year at the marketing awards where a few times there was a badly written paragraph and it said Anna to check or Anna to. So Anna did not check before it got to the judges. So that one. So, because if you can't be bothered spell checking, what that says to the judges is that perhaps the effectiveness is not as good. So please spell check, please.
I'm just talking about that for a moment, that whole writing process. One thing I've found useful in the past is getting people to brief the writer.
Yes.
Because then whoever's writing it will ask for clarification. Whoever is doing the briefing has got to think through what the key points are. So that process in itself can be quite useful as well.
The other thing I would say is sometimes, and I've heard this didn't happen in my organisation, but in other places, well, we don't really want to enter or have the client at the award event, because if we don't win, that's really embarrassing. But the fact that the client that there's been an impact, the client's backing you, maybe does want to come to the awards with you, win or not, you've won with the client because they've seen the impact. So don't be afraid of that, because I don't believe that clients see it like that. It's like, oh, of course we all want to win, but if they've put the entry in with you, if they've seen an impact, then they're happy. And I also think it's a great internal PR piece to say, hey, you were involved with this piece, it was great, let's celebrate that. So don't over focus on winning, which is important, but there's so much more benefits as well.
It's kind of what we're trying to do with the awards, isn't it? So we're trying to, here we're identifying and celebrating as industry, great work that's made a difference in society and with clients. But it's just getting clients there is actually helping grow understanding capability and potential future use of. And
we found it helped the client relationship and partnership because it just closed a loop, and they loved coming to the awards and having a good time with us, and win or not, it was great.
And they can still use it as internal case studies.
Absolutely.
That whole process of looking backwards to look forward is a really useful thing to go through.
Yeah, we know how to talk about the projects internally by the process of then writing them. And there's nothing quite like almost winning an award to have you coming back next time.
And that's very true. It's addictive.
Yeah, so from experience as well.
On that point though, there is a change in the metal that's being delivered this year. So there is no more platinum award. Dun dun dun. It will just be gold and silver.
That's why you said gold and silver before. I thought, what about the platinum?
So it's just going to be gold.
So it's the gold the new platinum, and the silver is the new gold.
So the silver is the new gold, and bronze means you attended. So
excellent. Yeah.
No, there's just it got a little bit confusing for some organisations. So we just made it really simple and gold and silver.
Perfect.
There you go.
And then supreme.
And then supreme.
But as you know, we sometimes have two goals in a category, or so the judges kind of have discretion to say, hey, this work deserves to be recognised, and this is how we kind of rate it.
And sometimes we don't have any.
And sometimes we have none. That's right.
Yeah. So watch the space, people. It sounds like there are quite a few entries coming in, starting to be talked around. I know there are some client-side entries that are being built together as well, which is really great to hear, which we're really pleased for. But any final tips and tricks? I'm conscious we're at 1:15. We have got a little bit more time, but I'm running out of questions.
Yeah.
The chat has dried up.
Some other little tips. So just do mention the quality of the insights. Do focus on the quality of them. So and ladder that to how it impacted. Do highlight any innovation, and do highlight the collaboration and teamwork and that engagement bit, because those are all things that's easy to not get in there.
Yeah.
But they do make a difference in your how compelling your story is, right?
Yeah.
I'd
say start with a few ideas on what you kind of write up, and that was my deep learning the year that I had two entries in the same category, and one took us 3 weeks of lots of pain to write, and it was big, and it was very much transforming how we were doing the work, and we saved a load of money, and it was very very technical. The other one started as a marketing awards entry, and actually the story broke backwards there, and we put all the methodology back into it. And when it said that we were a winner, we actually had to wait and say which one. And it wasn't the one I thought it was going to be. It wasn't the one that we were so invested in, as far as having put the right into there. It was the one that had the natural story for the impact of the and the effect.
Through that storytelling process with that one as well.
Yeah. So it was still a good process to going to go through, because then we could say, actually, this was a really great thing to do for all of these benefits that the business got out of it. But this is the one that actually changed what the stakeholders and what the ultimate clients were kind of doing.
I would say just do it, even if it's just one, just do it. And the judges, and I'm assuming this is the same as the marketing awards, will give some feedback, right, on the entrance. So you will learn. Yeah.
One question here from Nikki at Perceptive. In the past, we've been asked how many entries we're planning on submitting. Will we need to do this again at some point? No, not this time around, Nikki. We're trying to drive entries through the new agency or effective agency awards. So if you want to be considered for that, we'll need a minimum of 3 entries in there. So obviously we'd like to see more, but having said that, in the past we've had some organisations that have put a large number of entries in and not come away with very much. And then in some of the other years, the supreme winner has been the only entry from that particular organisation. So, it's down to the quality of the entry. Michael has got another question. When you kick off a project, you should start with the intent of submitting it for the effectiveness awards. How can we make this project the most effective? Oh, is this a statement or a question? It's a statement. For those of you who don't realise, Michael's sitting on my right. When you kick off a project, you should start with the intent of submitting it for an effectiveness award. How can we make this project the most effective as possible? First and foremost, for the project itself, just starting to prepare the next awards entries now. Yeah.
And I completely, that's exactly how I think.
Yeah, we have that mindset as well.
Yep, absolutely. It is a mindset.
Yeah.
Yep.
Get the most out of the work you do.
Absolutely. Everything is an award winner, potentially. Well, should be. Otherwise, to be honest, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
Why do this if it isn't going to be effective in some way?
And I think we're a wonderful bunch of people for hiding our light under a bushel. I know from experience asking people, what did we do with that particular project, or what's happened with that one? Oh, well, it only got 200% an increase in this. Oh, they didn't do, go out and ask the questions, go out and find out what's going on. And
Think more like an advertising agency.
Well,
What can we do with this?
Think about making the most out of what we're doing.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get some wonderful things, right? You see your client and they say, come with us, we show you a warehouse.
Yeah.
When we did the Air New Zealand, and no one knew about it for a year and a half, and they developed the
works.
premium economy.
Yeah.
That was
Very cool. Yeah.
hilarious. That blew us away.
Yeah.
That was ridiculous.
And the other reason to start with telling more kind of right now, right? Don't get fixated on one, because sometimes you will. Once you go and talk to your stakeholders, your clients,
There
and
might be
say,
others.
they will go. They will be really excited about the impact that it's made on there, and there's a story there that you weren't quite as aware of because you were busy on something that was bigger or had more numbers around it.
True.
Okay, I'm going to do one final call for questions from everybody on board. Thanks very much for those who've attended. This has been recorded, so you will be able to go back and get into the esteemed heads of our judges and former entries and chief judge. So please make the most of the opportunity. I hope everyone's been given a little bit more time and thought and guidance onto how to put a really good entry together. We have seen, I think, over the last 3 or 4 rounds, the quality has really started to lift, hasn't it? It's, there is a consistency there now that might not have, the range of entries might not have been there in the past.
There's another question just coming in.
Nicole, can video be considered supported evidence if relevant? Oh,
I'll let you answer that.
oh, thanks. I think the if relevant part there is, Nicole, is really the most important part. If you're going to try and cram most of your effectiveness into a 30-second video or a 2-minute video, it probably needs to go into the communications award rather than a category award. So think about what entry or what award you are entering that particular entry in. Remembering that, you know, video, we do the communications one is all about communication. So use of broadcast media, social media, print, whatever, to get that message across is really important.
But we have had video in the past. So
We have,
yeah.
But it has been quite short, and usually it's only been to show
It's to show a point, prove a point. Yeah.
So long as it's on topic, that would be great. Okay, we will leave it there. Thank you very much, everyone, for your contributions. Really looking forward to seeing what comes through this year. We've got Halloween night booked for the cocktail function.
Yeah, here's a question for you. Do we all dress up?
I'm going to leave that one to Claire.
Can you make that clear so we're not having some people coming in?
I think only the judges should dress up, and then everyone will know who the judges are, right?
Sure.
As judges.
Discussion around whether or not we might dress the venue, but it is a cocktail function, so you know, we've got our MC lined up, we've got our music lined up. We just want lots of entries to come through and lots of people there on the night. Fill out that place, celebrate the industry, celebrate the fantastic work that we've done, and in particular celebrate what it does for clients and participants who give us their time and effort into making this work happen. So thanks very much for your time, everybody, and we'll see you all in a few weeks at the awards.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Hey.
Thank you all.